Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your short break. So without further ado, let us commence the first session titled Endemic, New Crossroads Ahead for Arbitral Institutions, Keep Tradition or Start Anew. And now I would like to invite our moderator and speakers of the first session. Could you please rise and come forward and take your designated seats on stage. For session 1, the Honorable Mr. Steve Kim, Secretary General of the KCAB International, will serve as a moderator. And we have 6 speakers, including Mr. Eric Ng, Deputy Secretary General of HKIAC, and Justice Nagaswara Rao, former judge of the Supreme Court of India, and Dr. Chae Sung Lee, Senior Legal Officer at UNCITRAL, and Mr. Kevin Nash, Registrar of SIAC, Mr. Michael Lee, Independent Arbitrator and former Vice President of AAA ICDR, and last but not least, Dr. Dona Hwang, Director of ICC Arbitration and ADR for North Asia. And now it's my great honor and pleasure to introduce the distinguished moderator of Session 1, who is none other than the Honorable Mr. Steve Kim, Secretary General of KCAB International. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Steve Kim. I'm the Secretary General of KCAB International. Welcome to Seoul. For some of you, it's your first time. For many of you, it's a return trip, but after probably good 4 or 5 years, somewhere down the line as well. This is our in-person ADR conference. Again, for us, it's been about 4 or 5 years. So it's good to see the friendly faces and new faces here as well. So without further ado, I'd like to actually start session 1, and this is what we call the institution update. So what we do is for the past year or so, what have we been doing from the institution perspective? As an institution, we are steeped in tradition. There are core services that we need to be mindful of, but there are always challenges and new roads in which we need to pave. And as the theme suggests, this is a new world. No map, but as Christopher said, it may not be entirely without guidance on that as well. So let me just take a couple of minutes to introduce the panel members. And for me to say that people here are sitting up here, you're seeing perhaps the global foremost experts on ADR procedures, rules, and these are the people that you want to speak to in terms of getting any type of updates, what the institutions are doing and what directions they're actually going to. So without any particular order, I'm going to just give a very short background on it. Eric Ng, Deputy Secretary General of HKIAC. And we've known Eric for some time, and he's a barrister at law. And he's also an adjunct professor at University of International Business and Economics in Beijing. And certainly comes from Oxford and JD from City University of Hong Kong. So it's certainly, and he was very busy a couple of weeks ago running the Hong Kong arbitration, which was successfully, and he's still recovering from that as well, right? Dr. Chae Sung Lee, Senior Legal Officer at UNCITRAL, and International Trade Law Division of the United Nations Office Legal Affairs, and basically he's the go-to person in terms of finding out what UNCITRAL is doing on a working level, and you have Anna, who's actually giving the high-level global view as well. We call him Dr. Lee, but he doesn't really like to be referred to that, so we just ask him to, he asks to call him Jay on it, but he does have a PhD in law from Seoul National University. Next, actually, this time we invited, at the suggestion of our program director, someone from India. As you may know, India is actually one of these markets that everybody is actually either in or they want to be in. India certainly serves as one of the top filers for most major arbitration institutions. KCAB International is no exception. They're one of the top 10 as well. And it's actually my pleasure to have Judge Rao, a former judge from Supreme Court India, who's been there for 3 decades, writing basically decisions covering all aspects of law and of course, landmark decisions as well. And beyond that, his role as arbitrator and mediator, he's involved in a number of major arbitration institutions, including the Delhi International Arbitration Center and also a mediator with SIMC as well. Next to him is someone who doesn't really need that much introduction is actually Kevin Nash. Kevin's been with SIAC perhaps going about 10 years at this moment, so he's your go-to guy for anything that has to do with SIAC rules and procedures, case management, day-to-day operations, and certainly he's here in promotion of SIAC as well. He regularly speaks and teaches international commercial arbitration on a number of different levels as well. And he's actually from Canada, actually, right? It's a BA from Mount Allison University, JD from Osgoode Hall of Law. And I've known Kevin as perhaps the guy with the most amount of stress at this moment because of the should we say, the superb growth of SIAC and Singapore as the international media and arbitration forum as well. Next to him is actually Mr. Michael Lee, and who's been with ICDR AAA for over 15 years. So he's been running that. He's been based in Singapore for a long time as well. And Michael Lee just changed his role as an independent arbitrator, but certainly an expert in the ADR field and rules and procedures. And I'm going to be asking him a lot of questions in the United States because the U.S. has been in the news for some time for good or bad reasons as well. All right. And then last but not least, Donna. Donna is actually the Director of Northeast Asia for ICC, and no further really introduction needed. The Donna certainly is an expert in the ICC procedures. ICC is certainly one of the go-to institutions that you are all familiar with, and I think most of you have either spoken with Donna or you want to speak with Donna as well. So this time we'll be asking her from her global perspective from the ICC. In terms of where they're heading in this new world with no map. Right. Thank you very much. Okay. So having given them the slight background introduction, I'd like to actually start diving in with a little background story and then start with the questions. So what we're going to do is we're going to examine the endemic era of global economy and its unpredictable ebb and flow of waves. And then that's also affected by geopolitical events. So we already have seen, even for the past few weeks, events that were completely unpredicted as well. So with all this happening, arbitration institutions do not exist in a state of vacuum. And we often have to adjust our stance and positions and rules and procedures to reflect what's going on a global basis as well. Having said that, institutions face a great challenge because institutions traditionally have been around for a long time, those institutions that you are familiar with, and it's not easy for them to make radical shift in their rules, procedures, internal process, personnel, whatever that may be. But at times, it is seemingly and very obviously necessary as well. All of this happening and the requirement for them to actually change and pivot to the winds of the change, they also need to maintain high quality case administration, which is one of their core services, and maintain a world-class panel of arbitrators. And that is 2 or 3 things that we just expect from any institutions on any given time. So let's start with you, Kevin. Let's keep the topic in mind. And whether we want to actually keep the tradition or start anew. Singapore has been in the news and it has seen remarkable growth. And we continue to hear great stories from SIAC. From your perspective, what are your thoughts? You've heard the opening speeches and whatnot. What are your thoughts on the new economy? And how has SIAC pivoted to meet the challenges or in trying to hit a moving target?
Good morning, everyone. I think Christopher Lau said it best with welcome to the future and the talk of navigation for dispute resolution. I think also because we are in Seoul, I look at 18 March 2020 as a very important time for arbitration. So the release of the Seoul Protocol, I think that started the new generation of dispute resolution. So we're able to go through the pandemic. I think that arbitration has changed more in the past 3 years than it had in the past 10 years or 20 years. So now we have this new digital economy. When I'm looking at dispute resolution and the role of institutions, what I am always looking at is the fundamentals of arbitration. So everything we're doing at the institutional level is to remain faithful to those fundamentals of arbitration, the reason why users choose arbitration in the first place. But Steve, I think what is interesting is the new entrance into arbitration. So it's not blue chip companies that have been using arbitration for 30 years or 40 years. You have users that are using arbitration for the first time, particularly if you're looking at, say, disputes in crypto, blockchain, fintech. So to a certain degree, as institutions, we are auditioning for these new users. So is arbitration fast? Is it cost effective? Do you get to choose your decider, limited avenues of appeal, confidentiality, maybe all of our enforceability? Is it going to work for these new users? And one of the things that you have to do at institutions, and I think the Chief Justice of Singapore put it very well in saying that institutional representatives are no longer mere stewards. They're the real thought leaders in arbitration. So if we look at change, where is change coming from in this new economy? It's coming from UNCITRAL, it's coming from ICSID, it's coming from all of the institutions up on this stage. And we need to change in this new economy. So when we're releasing new rules, new procedures, it's all to remain faithful to those fundamental tenets. But what we look at SIC, and if you think about SIC's growth, we went from having 2 cases in 1991 to 1,000 cases. So how do you maintain the level of case management with an active caseload of 2 to 1,000? And so what I look at across the Secretariat, everything that we did before, we may need to update and change. Christopher Lau was talking about consumer preferences. So does everyone want to file hard copy notices of arbitration? Probably not. So SIC is working with Opus 2. Even our outreach and capacity building and marketing, that may need to change as well. So does the 90-minute conference format work in the same way? Or do we need to have 2-minute shorts? From a case management standpoint, should there be online filing, document management for the lifespan of the arbitration? Everything is online, and maybe it's done through your phone, maybe it's done through an app. But again, Steve, this is still arbitration, it is still dispute resolution. It's almost to a certain degree that the medium becomes the message of how you're delivering those dispute resolution services. But if I look all the way down the line on this panel, every institution, and I know them very well, has introduced a new procedure or an innovation that an institution then sees that it works, and we adopt it and we're able to run cases a bit better.
Kevin, I'm going to actually throw a little bit of a curveball at you. And, as is with any of these sessions, we have a lot of our questions pre-prepared, and we discuss the answers and what are you going to say and all of that. But with the growth of the Singapore SIC and the global ADR market in general, and you mentioned specific numbers, you said 2 to 1 and 2 to 1,000. So that is really unfathomable growth that's there. With any growth comes pain. When we say growing pains, and I think we all know what pain what we're talking about. Sometimes there are good pains, sometimes there are pains that we need to simply endure and try to actually beef up to cover that. How has your team, should we say, been covering and should we say, minimizing the growing pains? Right.
Steve, I guess the way you do it is that you put in procedures for next year and 2 years from now. At a busy institution, if you're putting in procedures because you realize that all of a sudden you have so many cases, it's already too late. So you have to plan for 1,000 cases before you get it, for 2,000 cases. So we're always looking on a 1-year, 5-year, 10-year plan. Even when you look at the SIC rules 2016, the provisions on consolidation, a lot of this was a Belt and Road angle, envisioning some of those big major project disputes. So if you, obviously, Steve, as you know, there is some day-to-day triaging that you have to do, but in terms of bandwidth, capacity, procedures, if you're having to change them on the fly, I wish you the best of luck, because that is going to be difficult to do at an institution.
That's actually, it sounds like a word of advice to a lot of the institution folks here. and that, if you're going to make changes, try to anticipate that good 2-3 years down the line as well. Let me then get Judge Rao on the microphone, please. Judge Rao, this is my first time meeting you, but obviously your market and the ADR industry in India has been on the topic for a number of years, some for good, some for not so good reasons as well. I'll be very honest with you. So let's talk about one of the trends that we see that the speakers we have spoken about yesterday. There are over 74 international or arbitration weeks across the world. 74. That means that's more than one per week. You could actually spend your entire year just going through arbitration weeks. I believe the newest one I saw last year was Copenhagen Arbitration Day. So get out to Denmark if you want, right? There's Boston Arbitration Day. California is really trying to come up to speed on that. India, as I mentioned in the introduction, is an important market for everybody in here, including Korea. We do a tremendous amount of business in there. SIAC, I know, is actually India is one of the top filers. You're one of our top 10. ICDR is one of the top 10 as well. So having said that, and I also see India popping up with case centers or international arbitration centers all over the place. What's your initial thought on whether should we let the market grow as is, or do we need to put in some kind of control mechanism, right? So could I get your thoughts on that first?
Thank you, Steve. Good morning, everyone. India is the fifth largest economy in the world, with about $3.75 trillion at present. And there's a prediction that it will become the third largest economy by the end of 2030. The idea of the government as well as the legislation is that to develop into an arbitration hub in the region, it is necessary that the legislature also has to take interest in the movement of arbitration in having robust institutions in the country. Ad hoc arbitration has been a norm for all these years in India, insofar as arbitrations are concerned. But institutions have started sprouting up, taking India as a very large country, and we have about 28 states. So there are institutions coming up in the major metropolises. Hyderabad Arbitration Center was started in 2021 with a governing council of which Mr. E.Y. Park is a member, along with Sir Bernard Eder and Toby Lando. We also made rules with their able guidance for international arbitrations as well as domestic arbitrations. Apart from Hyderabad, we have the Mumbai Arbitration Center as well as the Delhi Arbitration Center. And in the budget of 2022, the government has announced an international financial service center in the gift city in Ahmedabad, where they want a free zone, an economic zone also to be started, where SIAC has an office already. So there is momentum for arbitral institutions to start in India. After the recommendations of Justice B.N. Sri Krishna, who was a former Supreme Court judge, where he said that there should be a shift from ad hoc arbitrations to institutional arbitrations. Now there is interest shown even in the industry to promote institutional arbitrations, and they see this to be a neutral manner in which disputes would be settled. We also realize that an investor from the other countries would definitely be happy to come to India to invest only if he finds that there's an efficient dispute resolution mechanism. Insofar as the second part of your question is concerned about regulatory mechanisms, our Arbitration Act of 1996 was amended in 2019 to include an Arbitration Council of India. Arbitration Council of India is given the job of grading arbitral institutions, of ensuring that arbitration grows in the country with the institutions, apart from having accreditation of arbitrators. Also to ensure that the arbitrations keep in momentum with the developments in the other parts of the world. This provision of Section 43 of the Arbitration Act was notified only on October 12th of this year, recently. It has come into force and there's going to be an Arbitral Council of India. We have about 35 arbitral institutions in India. It's not as if they're competing with each other, but there is definitely a requirement of these arbitral institutions being regulated to ensure that people from outside the country who come and then invest would also embrace arbitration by resorting to the institutions for their dispute resolution.
Okay. That's interesting. The grading and the evaluation of the arbitral institution. Just to make sure that I understand this clear, has that started, or is that an ongoing process? Do you do this every 2 to 3 years? And if, for some reason, certain arbitral institutions in certain states or regions do not meet the minimum threshold, what do you intend to do with those centers?
The provision in the Act, as I said, was notified only recently. The Arbitration Council of India has not yet started functioning, but the provision indicates that the overall regulatory authority is the Arbitration Council of India, and if it finds that an institution is not up to the mark, the gradation would be less. And when people approach an institution, they would be having information about the performance of the institution. And insofar as appointments of arbitrators are concerned in India, as and when parties do not agree for appointment of an arbitrator, if it's an international arbitration, they go to the Supreme Court of India. And Section 11 of the 1996 Act provides that the Supreme Court of India would delegate the functions of appointment of an arbitral tribunal to the institutions. And this gradation of institutions would stand in good stead when the Supreme Court takes a call as to which institution would be deciding the matter. And appointments as of now are being done by the Supreme Court insofar as international arbitrations are concerned. Once the Arbitration Council of India comes into force, then the arbitral institutions would be appointing arbitral tribunals. As of now, most of the arbitration clauses of contracts entered into by parties in India with their counterparts outside the country have either the ICC or SIAC or the LCII as the institution. There has been a start for the industries getting confidence in the institutions which have been started recently. And once they start introducing the clause, then there's no question of the court interfering. Appointment will directly be made by the institutions. But as of now, there are a number of applications filed to the Supreme Court in international arbitrations for appointment of arbitrators. That is delegated to the institutions. That's another amendment. And when gradation is done and performance is evaluated by the Arbitration Council of India, then the Supreme Court would definitely be looking into it as and when appointments are being given to the arbitral centers.
Okay, so now the same type of question will go to you, Judge Rao, and I apologize for putting you in this spotlight. India, as you mentioned, is going to be one of the major global economies. It already is. And many of the law firms here or practitioners here and outside of Korea have dealt with India-based or India-related matters. Now comes the challenge of we have the award. Now we need to actually then go on behalf of our client and actually execute the award. There are good stories from India. There are stories that, okay, this might be a little more challenging than we thought it was going to be. That's putting it gently because you are a judge. So may I ask you to then somehow explain what the status of the current enforcement market is for India? Any tips that you may have for the global practitioners are saying, okay, that I recognize some of the issues, but if you do A, B, C, then it may actually then alleviate some of those pain points, right?
I agree with you, Steve, that for a very long period of time, there was excessive interference by the courts in matters relating to arbitration, which was not sending the right signal to the industry. Even people getting awards outside, even if they go to SISC or ICC and get an award, enforceability was a problem earlier. After the amendment that was made to 2015, public policy has been given a new dimension where there was a direction or a mandate from the legislature that on the grounds of public policy, there would not be a merit review insofar as awards are concerned. We have a separate chapter for enforcement of foreign awards. There was a stage where courts were going into the merits of the foreign award as well to deny the enforcement of an award. There were delays that were happening. But I should tell you, in the 6 years of my career, in the last 6 years, there were so many judgments of the Supreme Court where we have said that there should be minimal interference in so far as awards are concerned, even the domestic ones, and that the enforcement of foreign awards should also be speeded up. So the court has been playing a major role insofar as making arbitration being accepted by people who are coming, and the arbitration also is accepted by persons who are coming from outside insofar as enforcement is concerned. You know that 1958 New York Convention, 50% of persons going to arbitration are more on enforceability of their awards. That becomes a very important factor. As of now, there has been a specific mention in the provision itself that there should not be any merit review insofar as enforcement of awards is concerned. In the metropolises like Delhi, Bombay, Chennai, as well as Calcutta, you see courts responding very fast. I'm not very sure that this has gone into the hinterland, but definitely a message has been sent by judgments written by the Supreme Court. According to the Constitution, a judgment written by the Supreme Court is the law of the land. And all the courts have to follow the judgments of the Supreme Court. So enforcement of awards is no more the same as it was earlier. It's definitely not difficult. Things have changed now. And people who have gone to Indian courts recently for enforcement of foreign awards would have seen that there is a dramatic change insofar as enforcement is concerned. And it's for the good.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Donna, ICC is most likely synonymous with, international arbitration. You've been around for a long, long time. It's, as I mentioned, it's one of the go-to, arbitration institutions there. And being one of the most recognizable arbitration institutions, we're curious as to how a large and very steeped in tradition institution like ICC is moving around in this new economy. Have you changed the way that you are now interacting with your clients externally? Have you pivoted your position with your marketing strategy? And the reason why I mentioned that, I will probably go back to all of the institutions here, and we'll be honest, for the past 2-3 years, it really hasn't been all that good for the institution when it comes to numbers. And some years were okay, but last year was definitely challenging. And this year, we think it's rebounding. So all of that, as Kevin mentioned, change is required. So could I ask you to actually explain what changes are we seeing from ICC, and what can we anticipate from ICC?
Okay, thank you so much, Steve. And first of all, I just want to thank KCAB International to organize such a wonderful event. And on behalf of the ICC, we're truly honored to be part of this event in associate with Ansi and Minister of Justice. And also on behalf of myself, I want to extend my sincere gratitude, because for the past 10 days I've been in Paris. You can imagine having croissant for the breakfast for the past 10 days. How pleasure that I've been felt for having like a Asia hot veggies for my breakfast today. So thank you so much. And regarding the questions, given this is the centenary year of the ICC court, maybe we can one step back to see the ICC court's 100-year history. So in 1923, on the first day that ICC court was established, our goal, our mission was not, the preliminary mission was not to resolve dispute. And that mission was to promote peace and prosperity through global cross-border trade. So within that in mind, you will find that, that over the last 100 years, we've implemented two key strategies to stay true to our mission. So first, we've transformed ourselves into a truly universal, accessible, and international institution. So back in 2008, it was that the ICC established its first overseas offices in Hong Kong. And after that, we've been spanned our footprint across Singapore, New York, Sao Paulo, Abu Dhabi, and Paris. So this marks a significant transformation from the ICC's initial, Euro-central focus to becoming a very truly global institution. This transformation was certainly market-driven, and our leadership recognized the need for being capable of administrating our cases at the local level to where our users are. So this is the first strategy, to being truly international. The second strategy is to promote diversity within the international arbitration community. We did a very brief research recently to look back of the ICC's 100-year history. For the first 5 decades, the top 10 ICC arbitrators are all white men from continent Europe. And now in 2022, we have arbitrators, over 1,200 arbitrators from 90 jurisdictions, and over 27% are women. So you can imagine how much efforts that the ICC have been put to increase the diversity in this community. So this is a two strategy we've been maintained or wanted to insist for the future ICC's work. Regarding the market strategy, I would say that Asia is, of course, one of our priority region, if not the only. In this region, we see immense potential. In September this year, the ICC hit a milestone caseload by our registration, the 28,000 case under the ICC arbitration routes. So the 28,000 case involved 2 Asia parties. So you can find inside of the ICC, Asia parties have becoming more and more significant and important. So the progress that Asian jurisdictions have been made in international arbitration is also very significant. We see a lot of efforts that the government has been made to, like you said, there are like over 74 international arbitration week during 1 year. So I've been traveling very frequently in the North Asia part for attending the international arbitration week, including weekends in Pakistan. So you may find in Asia, government has been putting a lot of resources here to attract or to build themselves a preferred seat of international arbitration. So this is something that I think ICC wanted to make more investment here and to put more our resources here.
Great. The question of diversity, and you also mentioned, and then I think Kevin also mentioned the new entrants, and a number of new arbitration institutions that are popping up on the map. So in other words, there is a whole new set of beauty contests that's happening among the arbitration institutions to attract new market segments, as Kevin, you mentioned, whether that's digitally or tech-driven companies. And we're all trying to actually grow the international arbitration market rather than trying to take a larger piece of pie from the same size market as well. So now let's go to one of the a major arbitration market in the United States, to ICDR. Michael, while you've been based in Singapore, you represent one of the largest U.S.-based institutions. Now, the U.S. actually is an interesting market because it is large, it is very open. So meaning that there are other key players that AAA ICDR now has to contend with. You and I share stories about New York and Miami. And I briefly mentioned California trying to actually catch up to the race and getting into the beauty contest as well. On top of that, you represent a jurisdiction, the U.S., where a lot of these new leading technologies or trends are actually originating from your jurisdiction. So as an institution, two-part question. One, how are you dealing with all of the new competitors that's actually coming up? And they're not small competitors. They're well-funded. They know what they're doing. New York and Miami, New York and Los Angeles, and all of that, that's one. Second thing is, my second question, on the new market, are you content with AAA ICDR simply following the new trends and you catch up to the trends, or are you trying to break new grounds along with some of the more innovative companies that we see coming out from the U.S.?
Thanks, Steve. It's a big question, but before I get going, just so you know, I left AAA ICDR about 2 months ago. So this will be my unofficial last assignment representing AAA ICDR. Since I don't work for them, I'll say a lot of things I probably shouldn't say.
That's perfect.
And when we're looking at United States and the institution, I think we need to separate the two. And if we are going to discuss United States, my passport says I'm American, but I don't technically represent United States. I think Donald Trump represents United States. So I have no accountability. But if we take United States first and separate them into sort of today's discussion topics, we can separate them into two categories. United States as a party, and the United States as a seat. United States as a party, since the United States still is one of the largest economy, it's still very strong. There are plenty of cases. They are parties to a lot of our arbitrations. In the foreseeable future, I don't think there will be any significant changes in terms of them being a part of a party to an arbitration cases. In our domestic practice, AAA, we receive a decent size of caseload each and every year, and that has been trending up in terms of domestic cases. So for domestic arbitrations, we receive anywhere from 350,000 to 400,000 cases per year. So that's close to 500,000 cases domestic, and it's been trending up. So as a party, the United States will still continue, and their reach with transactions to international companies will increase. So I'm not quite worried about in that aspect. However, when we look at United States as a seat, now we're beginning to see some changes. First of all, it's big, and there are different states' interest everywhere. But New York lawyers have been noticing that New York has been losing grounds to Singapore as a seat of arbitration for a while now. So I think that they start noticing it about 10, 12 years ago. And it wasn't so alarming at that moment, but now it's getting to a point where they need to act. So in order to repair or get back their former glory, they wanted to push New York as a seat, and the driver for that movement was New York Bar Association. The problem with that one was there were so many different interests that were all sort of intertwined, they didn't really get a momentum. Um, Obviously, they reached out to us. I shouldn't probably say us because I'm not AAA anymore, but they reached out to us and see if we can join them in terms of promoting New York as a seat. And this is when we were trying to position ourselves as an international center, not New York-based center. So we declined. So we sort of left them hanging, and I think they lost momentum there. And at the same time, the South America, their market has been growing. We have been involved. So Florida, Miami wanted to be a seat of all South America related arbitrations, and California, because of all the tech companies and other projects with wind powers and oil related stuff. So they wanted to have their centers, and they wanted to have their arbitration seated in California. So while United States as a party may still be strong, U.S. as a seat of arbitration, I think they're still chaotic. We're not quite sure what's going to happen or who's going to take charge and be the next Singapore. Because Singapore was the next New York, but now the New York has lost its ground. So I'm not quite sure if that's going to work out in any foreseeable future. If we go back to institutions' role, if we divide it into pre-pandemic, during pandemic, and post-pandemic, pre-pandemic, I think we're lucky. Even before pre-pandemic, because of sheer size of caseloads, we invested heavily on technology, servers and case management softwares. And then when pandemic happened, whether we intended or not, we were basically almost there already. So all we sort of had to do was issue a laptop instead of desktop computers, and then have the case managers sit and work from home. So in that way, transition during pandemic was relatively easier. And then during pandemic, we went through what everybody went through. We learned a lot of new things. We had to come up with new approach. Now with the post-pandemic, we have a few systems in place. We have a template for procedural orders that accounts for all the Zoom calls and other cybersecurities. So I think all institutions have prepared from what we have learned. Now, post-pandemic, I do see us swinging back, or at least attempting to go back to normal, or what it was before, and then we are overcompensating it. But I don't think people will forget what we have learned during pandemic. So when it normalizes, I think we'll have something. But the problem that I've seen over the years with the institution was institutions are generally reactive instead of being proactive. There's a danger when you are proactive. That means you want to be a thought leader. You create something hoping that the market will accept it. It's much easier when you are reactive, but there's a big reward for being proactive. And I think we have to balance that as well. But at the end of the day, all institutions appear, during beauty contests, we say as if we're the best, or we're the only thing. But at the end of the day, we share more similarities than differences. This is where you go file your cases. A lot of rules happen to sort of resemble each other. If somebody comes up with a great idea, we see if it's working, and then after a couple of years, we all adopt the similar versions. So in terms of the institution's direction, I wish that institutions take more proactive approach along with the reactive approach so we can account for a lot of things that might happen because, as Chris said, AI is coming and the guidelines are supposed to be issued by the institutions. But if we react or if we take a traditional reactive position, we may be too late. And since I don't work for AAA, I wish they can take the lead and then fail and then learn something and then others could follow suit and not repeat the same mistakes. And whenever we are on this stage, I used to hate all of our competitors, but now that I'm an independent, I like you all. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael. And we'll come back to it. There are a bunch of more questions I want to ask you. And you made the mistake of bringing up Donald Trump, so I'm going to be harping you on that one as well. Eric, you've been patiently sitting here awaiting your turn. So I was at your Hong Kong Arbitration Week, very well attended, record number, your charity ball, I think went up to like 2 a.m. with like 800 people, and it just wouldn't stop. And it showed, and as Mariel put up on her LinkedIn post that, hey, if anybody questions Hong Kong and its place in the international arbitration, come and speak to her, and basically your arbitration week actually speaks for itself. And and I agree, and congratulations. I hope your recovery is going well, right? So, but the question still remains. So I'll give you the two-part question. One is, everything that you've heard so far, whether that's reactive, proactive, AI, tradition, look 2 years ahead and, or use what you have well. So can you tell me, just to give me a brief synopsis of what HKIAC has been doing for the past year or so in actually trying to recover from the pandemic? That's one. Trying to actually then anticipate the next set of moves, right? And then I'll let you answer that, and then I'll ask us a bit more sensitive and difficult question. Yes.
Sure, thanks, Steve, and thank you. I have recovered well from Arbitration Week. And one thing from that really showcased some of the things that we have been doing over the course of the last year have shown that Hong Kong, we've done a lot of work to try and get Hong Kong back on the map, to sort of recover from the pandemic and sort of showcase to the wider world a lot of the developments, a lot of the things that we've done, both in Hong Kong and at HKIAC over the course of the last few years. And there's too many for me to list out right now in terms of developments in our arbitration law, developments in the HKIAC's procedures, developments in technology. I would need a full session for that. But it really sort of comes down to a couple of fundamental points. How do we continue to adapt and change while keeping a focus on the fundamental characteristics of arbitration? And when I mean the fundamental characteristics of arbitration, I really, really do mean the fundamental characteristics, which are the core reasons why people go to arbitration in the first place, which is it's supposed to be cheaper, it's supposed to be faster, and it's supposed to be more flexible. Those are the three things that we need to take as core principles. Everything else can change. And the reason I say that is because, as has been noted by some of the other speakers, from an institutional perspective, there is sometimes a sense of inertia. There is a sense of, this is how we've done it, these are our procedures, these are things that have been working for the last several years, and therefore we should be able to keep going like that. And maybe we can make change, but it doesn't necessarily have to be radical change. It doesn't have to be very rapid change. Well, the pandemic really showed the flaws in that sort of approach, and it showed that there can be significant disruptors in the market that have allowed now, that require institutions, require entities to institute rapid change. And so we're talking now about an age of disruptors, an age where you have the pandemic, you have global deglobalization, you have the advent of AI, right? And you have all of these concerns that are coming up. We're living in an age where things are changing more rapidly than we can get our heads around. And so from our perspective, we are faced with what I like to call the Kodak problem. And the Kodak problem is this. Back in the 1990s, Kodak was the largest producer of camera supplies and film in the world. Right? They were the #1 player on the market, bar none. In the late 1990s, you started to see digital cameras. And digital cameras, the biggest issue was they didn't need film. And Kodak looked at it and says, well, that's a new player on the market, but digital cameras are too expensive. The process of making them is too difficult. The quality is not as good as we have with film. We don't have to worry about it. And so Kodak never made any moves into digital. They didn't try to do a digital camera. They didn't try to adapt to that changing market. 20 years later, who still has a Kodak camera? And when was the last time that you bought Kodak film? That's the situation we have with arbitration and with institutions now. We look at the stage up here, and I have massive respect for all of the institutions here, but there are institutions which are not here. And they are growing, and they are developing, and they are hungry. And they are going to drive, to change, to adapt to the digital economy, and they're already here. And so as Anna, Ms. Juban-Brett had mentioned in her welcoming remarks, we are already behind the 8 ball in terms of being able to adapt to change. And so from an institutional perspective, at least what HKIC has done, what we've done in terms of Hong Kong, has been we have to look not just 2 years in advance, but look down 5 years, 10 years in advance. What are things that are going to be happening in the market? Who are the new entrants onto the market? What are we looking at, for example, when we talk about, for example, smart contracts? When we talk about entities like Claros, where they're fundamentally changing the fabric of how dispute resolution works by the fact of anonymous jurors instead of arbitrators, right? How do we look at the changing fabric of legal culture? Right? Especially when we look at Asia disputes. Close to 75% of HKIC matters right now are governed by Hong Kong, English, or Singapore law. Right? Those are the 3 major laws. They're all common law. And yet, we see month to month, year to year, a growing proportion of civil law lawyers who are representing clients in these transactions. Lawyers from Korea, lawyers from Japan, lawyers from the People's Republic of China. Right? The psychology of arbitration and what these lawyers are expecting when they're going into an arbitration are fundamentally different. So as Donna had mentioned, diversity is now no longer an issue of gender or an issue of race. It is an issue of legal culture. It is an issue of you don't want 3 King's Counsel on a single bench deciding a matter when you have 2 civil law lawyers and civil law counsel who are representing the parties. That's not what the users bargained for. And at the end of the day, as a service industry, we have to cater for the users. And so for us as an institution, and I'm sure I'm not just speaking for myself here, this is something where we are faced with an issue where everything is changing and we have to adapt very quickly. And the only way that we can do that is by only finding the absolute fundamentals that we have, being able to stick to those and saying everything else, whether it's procedure or technology or how we handle, for example, online case management, how we handle service, how we handle notice, all of that has to be able to change. It has to be able to go out if we needed to. And that's how we've been approaching it.
Eric, very straightforward, very candid answer. You know, it's a kind of answer that you normally wouldn't be able to get to hear from an institution. But I think that's basically what every institution has been saying in so many words, one way or the other. So, Eric, I'll ask you, as I promised, one more difficult question. I am in full agreement with you, as all of the practitioners here are asking the institutions, can you do it faster? Can you be more efficient? Can you hire more people? Right? Do whatever that's necessary. You know, we applaud your growth and all of that. But Hong Kong, you face a slightly more sensitive challenge here, as your boss, Mary, has been flying around the world trying to actually explain. Many of us in here we have noted, and there's a preconceived notion that Hong Kong, China, where's the balance? Where is the heyday of Hong Kong? and I'm being honest, in that, Hong Kong used to be the go-to arbitration. I mean, when you come to Asia, it was HKIC. That was it, let's say 15, 20 years ago. And now that has, that picture is changing. And, Michael has alluded to that. Singapore, Kevin has, in so many words, alluded to that as well. What's your thoughts on current stance of the HKIAC? How do you then balance all of the political sensitivities that's seemingly out there? You have the views from the users who are saying, who's thinking twice about not going to Hong Kong, to be in all honesty, right? So how would you answer that?
I mean, you weren't kidding about the difficulty of the question, well, but thank you. And my answer is this. 2 weeks ago, we had a similar conference for the ADR in Asia conference for Hong Kong Arbitration Week, and we used a Japanese concept as the theme for that conference. We called it the kintsugi of 21st century arbitration. And what we meant by that is kintsugi, in case you don't know, is a Japanese ceramic art where you take pottery that's been broken or has been damaged, and you fill in the cracks with this gold filigree. And at the end of the day, you have something which previously was broken, which was damaged, but has become something else, and through that artwork has become something different, and in many cases better. And in many ways, we feel that that is an accurate analogy of Hong Kong as the seat of arbitration. We have a situation, as you've alluded to, of political sensitivity, of political development over the course of the last 4 to 5 years. Over that course of time, yes, there have been political situations. But the commercial arbitration market has also seen significant development and reaction and adaptation to that. This is, again, the answer that I gave in terms of reacting to disruptors, right? And those disruptors, in many cases, was the pandemic, but also relation to political issues. But the commercial market has always stayed strong, and the developments that we've made in response in terms of international arbitration have made arbitration in Hong Kong a stronger creature. We've made changes to technology so that people can adapt to the pandemic. Virtual hearings now become part and parcel of the normal hearing, right? There's now much more willingness on parties to use technology to video conference in a witness. The idea of an in-person case management conference is ancient history. So technology has helped make things better. We've made changes to the arbitration ordinance to allow for better funding of arbitrations, to allow for better financing of arbitrations, which are seated in Hong Kong. And we have the interim measures arrangement, which was entered between Hong Kong and the People's Republic of China, which allows for you to obtain interim measures from mainland Chinese courts. And that specifically goes to the enforcement of your of award, right? Which is something you don't have in any other seat outside of mainland China. All of these things provide an objective view to show that there is a vested interest in keeping international arbitration in Hong Kong strong. And that market has stabilized over the course of the last couple of years. So yes, there were points in time over the course of the last 4 years where there were serious doubts about Hong Kong. But I feel like we've come out of that area. I feel like we've weathered that storm. And what we have now in terms of international arbitration in Hong Kong, I feel is honestly a better and a stronger system than we had 5 years ago.
Thank you very much. Very well spoken. Jay, or Dr. Lee, you've had the benefit of actually listening to the institution's insight, their plans, whatnot, and I want to try, and as Michael alluded to, is that I think most of our backbone stems from UNCITRAL arbitration rules. That's what we use. And this is when I actually do tours, when I actually give speeches, and when I tell the users, when you go to an institution, when you try to select an institution, the rules are pretty much the same because there's UNCITRAL UN rules that's serving as a foundation to that. Now, having said that, and having listened to the past hour on everything that's going on and very passionate speeches and what we need to do, the role of institutions, all of that, could I get your views on your colleagues are going to talk about digital economy later on, but UNCITRAL's current status? What activities are you engaged in? What are some of the things that you want to let the institution and the users know, right? These are the things that we're actually looking at or focusing, whether that's diversity, we're looking at, and your views on, okay, well, you said the title was, do we keep tradition or do we start anew? You know, which position does Unsutra take on that as well? Right.
So thank you. It's nice to be back in Seoul. This is my 12th time attending this conference, meaning that I've been here every time. And I've been here in person for the 3 years during the pandemic. So it's nice to see the full back in-person status. Now, let me give a little bit of a different perspective from the others because I don't represent an arbitral institution. UNCITRAL is a body of the United Nations, which is supposed to be a legislative body in international trade law. So our work spans not only on ADR, but also in different areas of international trade. But as you mentioned, we have our standards on ADR, which is the backbone of arbitration as a whole, the New York Convention, as we function as the guardians. Now, one of the questions that we get is, are there any plans to update the current text? That is not true. There is no plans to update the UNCITRAL arbitration rules or to update the model law, but there is quite a number of work being undertaken by the working groups in the area of ADR. So let me just give you an update of what's going on. And I think it's the surrounding environment of what you said as the core backbone of UNCITRAL arbitration. So working group 2 is actually working to develop something that is more expedited than the expedited arbitration rules. So working group 2 finalized the work on UNCITRAL expedited arbitration rules in 2021, but now what they're preparing is a model clause for parties to agree to a more highly expedited arbitrations. We are referring to it as a highly expedited, but we don't know whether it's going to be highly expedited, whether it's going to be quick and dirty, as Anna likes to say. But we don't know what that's going to be with, but it's a model clause for parties to agree to. So it's more of a party autonomy perspective of parties agreeing to something more quicker. Now, this would provide for a shorter time period than the expedited arbitration rules, so it's not supposed to be shorter than the 6 months, and it also provides for an expert determination phase, meaning that some experts would be able to take a decision, and the parties are supposed to comply with that decisions, and only if they don't comply, there will be a full-fledged arbitrations. So this is kind of a model clause that Working Group 2 is developing, and this work stems from requests from states for us to work on technology disputes. They're saying that technology industries need a more quicker dispute resolution methods, and that is where we started. But these model clauses that is being developed by the working group is not supposed to be working only in the tech industry, but is going to be more generic in the sense that they can apply to any kind of an industry for parties that want a more quicker resolution of the disputes. And you will hear more from Atita in session 2 about our stock taking of the digital economy aspects in the dispute resolutions area. Moving on to Working Group 3, which Anna will touch upon later, we have recently, Working Group 3 has a broad mandate to conduct ISDS reforms, and we have recently concluded the first set of reform elements, one of them being a code for conduct for arbitrators, which is supposed to apply not only to ICSID, but also in the non-ICSID context, mostly in the case of UNCITRAL proceedings, and therefore it's a surrounding environment that would apply in the case of conjunctions with the UNCITRAL arbitration rules. So this is something that Anna will touch upon in session 3. I'll just note that in a recent session of Working Group 3, which met in October last month, there were some proposals by states to conduct, because we're looking into some of the procedural rules reform, and there have been some proposals that some of the procedural rules reform that the Working Group 3 will be developing may become a supplement to the UNCITRAL arbitration rules. This is an idea that's been floating around by some of the states, so this may end up having a add-on to the UNCITRAL arbitration rules, which was revised in 2013 to incorporate the transparency rules in investment arbitration, but also in 2021 to incorporate the expedited arbitration rules. And as Anna mentioned in her opening remarks, we're looking into rules on data contracts and the use of AI as well. So these are all hot topics. But I just wanted to go back a little bit because the Secretariat continues to support states in implementing the old text, the traditional text of the model laws. And we're getting news about new enactments of the model law, not only of the model law on arbitration, but the model law on mediation. We also heard that Japan signed and became a party to the Singapore Convention. So it's as if we're not going to only look to the future, but we are looking to the past and ensuring that states actually do enact and ensure that the backbone functions as the backbone of arbitration. So that's probably my first response to your question.
So whether that's quick and dirty process or more expeditious or highly expeditious, exactly how expeditious do we have to be? We get nervous because whenever you put those things out, institutions have to comply with them. And we talked about appointing emergency arbitrators, and I think we're now down to 24 hours, right? And one of the new entrants may say we could do it in 12. Right? So could you give a little bit clarification on the highly expeditious? What will be the rough time frame that we should anticipate from beginning to end?
That is left to the working group, but I think it might be quite difficult for us to actually agree on a fixed time frame. It's going to be in square brackets because it's going to be a model clause anyway. It's for the parties to decide what the dates are. There may be an indicative period of about 60 days to render the award. 3 days or 5 days, I think, so we're trying to shorten the time periods in the expedited arbitration rules for the appointment of the arbitrators, as well as for the conference management. But it's going to be mostly indicative in the sense that it will be left to the parties to choose what they want in the model clause.
Thank you. Kevin, can I come back to you? And I'm going to ask you a question that is not on the list. Your recent revision to the SIAC rules and the draft that you have released for the public for their commentaries, I took a quick look at it, and many of the major practitioners, I took a look at it, and I said, on a couple of things, I said, wow. Right, wow. So the SIAC, your Singapore International Arbitration Center is really now trying to broaden their market footprint. One of the provisions that caught my eyes was that you are now going to you have the authority to handle investment disputes or inter-country disputes, which have you, maybe I'm just not up to speed on your type of cases you handled. Have you always had those types of disputes and you're just affirming it in your rules, or are you actually now throwing in your challenge card to the very big the cases that everybody wants? I mean, you have the madam from Exit here, the king of the investment state disputes. But are you actually now challenging the market as well?
I would second Eric's point on the difficult questions and off-list questions as well. I appreciate those, Steve. Actually, we have a separate set of investment arbitration rules, so I don't think that the commercial rules purport to be really or designed or a bespoke set of rules for investment disputes. So I think that you still can have it under the commercial rules, but we have the specialized investment arbitration rules there as well. And I think for all the institutions, we administer under UNCITRAL. UNCITRAL administered arbitrations work very well. So really, I think the headlines from the 7th edition of the SIAC rules, and I thought it was interesting when you were talking about the like super expedited procedure. We had, from a nomenclature standpoint, we had some internal surveying on our streamlined procedure, because that seems to be what's getting most of the attention. And then it becomes a question to a certain degree, is how fast is too fast? So do we keep trying to increase the speed, and are we willing to lose precision? I can remember a few cases where there was actually an institutional decision challenge because the party said that SIAC couldn't possibly have come to a decision this quickly. It was too fast. You couldn't have considered all of the parties' submissions. And then there's a larger question as well of whether or not parties are entitled to an inefficient arbitration. And we were discussing this at an event last night. So where does the institution and the tribunal step in? How proactive should you be? And even from a case management standpoint, how interventionist should we be as institutions with all of these new procedures that are making arbitrations faster and faster? So if you had, and I'll give you an example, and we do this from time to time, I have seen an $800 dispute in an SIC arbitration before. So if it's an $800 dispute in a 3-member tribunal, should we, when we're commencing the arbitration, ask the parties whether they have perhaps considered mediation? So my answer to that, in terms of the mandate of the institutions, the answer should be yes. Because as an institution, when we're administering cases, ultimately our goal is to resolve disputes. So whether the parties settle somewhere along the line, whether it goes to a final award or you have a bifurcated or trifurcated proceeding, our goal is to resolve disputes, however it gets resolved. But I do think that these super expedited procedures, fast-track procedures, streamlined procedures, again, there's a big contingent in SIC that wants to call it the flash procedure. I do think that these are important from an access to justice standpoint and from the new markets, which is sort of the theme that we're talking about today. Arbitration can be expensive, and there is somewhat of a barrier to entry on arbitration. There's a lot of money, particularly in institutional arbitration, that you have to put up front. Now, one of the advantages of arbitration that I think that we don't talk about enough is the fact that costs follow the event. So if you are a successful claimant, if you have been substantially successful in all of your claims, in most jurisdictions, you will get all of those costs back. But we want to remove the barriers to entry, and I think some of the optics where you think that this is going to take a very long time. I don't want to use this thing called arbitration. I'm going to go to a different forum. So that's a lot of what we're doing. And I think consistent across all the sets of institutional rules here, all very good rules. UNCITRAL as well, that we've all learned a lot from. It's all these expedited, streamlined, emergency, early dismissal, all of these things I think are to make it faster, but you do have to maintain the precision as well. And as a final point, I have seen a lot of clauses over the years where it will say within the clause, arbitration award to be made in 7 days or 14 days. And we'll get a call from counsel and someone will say, can you do it? And I say that we will try. So do not embed it in the clause, use the institutional provisions.
Thank you. So you've heard from all of the institutions, and I represent KCAB International, and I came into this position about 1.5 years ago. I had actually started my career at the AAA ICDR back in 1998 and served as its director for about 7 years. And then I had the privilege of working for in-house counsel for Samsung, and then I went out to do other commercial things, very pure sales and marketing strategy type of work. So when I came to this position, I sat down with my members and I said, I don't want to talk about arbitration anymore. And they said, well, what are we going to talk about? Right? We're an arbitral institution. And I actually told them, let's talk about everything that is driving the current economy, whether that's technology or ESG or AI or anything that is going to generate future work. Welcome to the future, as Chris said, right? In that way, and as I mentioned in my speaker's turn yesterday, the role of institutions, other than the fact that 3 core values, we need to do it more efficiently, more cost effectively, right? And all of that. Those 3 things need to remain, and everything else needs to change. I want KCAB International, or I want the institution to be a source of information and guidance for the next generation business to come, as you mentioned, to see, okay, well, there's good, useful set of information there, and then they would directly or indirectly become clients of arbitration, right? And it's a long road, right? And many of the big practitioners here, you look at big corporate companies here and you look at them as targets. I would always actually advise you to look at the secondary and the niche market here in Korea, which may actually end up giving you stickier relationship and even better revenue over the long run. Having said that, the role of an institution, according to every one of you, now need to change. How are you dealing with arbitrators who need a bit of a help in elevating their brand, so their personal brand, their firm's brand, and whatnot? Michael, could I start with you? I mean, I think you've been dealing with arbitrators in that way for some time. Even though ICDR does, let's say, 1,000 cases, you can't give cases to every arbitrator that you have on your list, and that's just a reality. Is it your point of view that the institution should take a more commercial approach, more sensitive to their brand elevation?
I think there's certainly that aspect to that. I'll be lying if I say it's not. we found out what I'll tell you what we're doing now. And I'm not sure if it's going to pay off, but it is certainly costing us a lot of money to do. We are inviting all of our commercial panel members to our regional offices and then video film them so they can give 5-minute pitch about themselves. So it's sort of like a meet your arbitrator. So they're coming in either with a script or no script, but we're filming them, we're posting them. So instead of just a reading CV, you can see them speaking to you. So that's our idea of, I don't know if you could call that commercializing, but we're certainly trying to give them exposures. But we do have a justification because as a party representative, when you're looking for a good arbitrators, you want to, so sometimes just reading CV of internet may not be good enough. And there are a lot of really good arbitrators who are not popular or famous, but legitimately good arbitrators. So that was our attempt to give them some exposures.
That's a great idea. I will take you up on that. Eric, could I ask you, have you, I mean, you've heard, and those are some of the approaches that I personally have done when I speak with the arbitrators. And listen, we have a limited number of international cases that comes to our center. It's never the Singapore number or the ICDR number. So one of the things that I can do for you is put you on our platform, giving you opportunities and get your name brand more recognized here in this very important Korean market and elsewhere. What about you? I mean, you seem to have, you have a whole new, not only from China, but like you said, other markets that's coming in, arbitrators saying, I want to be an arbitrator. How do I actually, quote unquote, do sales here?
Right. I mean, from our perspective, we have a very interesting, very good balance between very senior, very experienced arbitrators, but we've also spent a lot of time and a lot of effort over the course of the last several years to make sure we're growing that pool, both in terms of younger arbitrators who we know will do a good job, or we've seen do a good job, but may not necessarily have that cachet with to get them party appointments just yet, to make sure that they are getting the experience they need as an arbitrator and through institutional appointment. And then also a matter of also by increasing the pool, we're increasing diversity, again, not just in terms of gender and race, but also legal culture, background, and nationality. One of the other things that we're also doing is, making sure that all of the arbitrators, whether they're senior or junior, are familiar with the tools that they need in order to operate in arbitration in today's day and age. And one of those is, for example, our Case Connect system, which we launched in 2021, which provides for an online repository and online case management between the parties and the tribunal over the course of the arbitration. From 2021 to today, we are still doing individual sort of training sessions with each of our arbitrators. So if you are an arbitrator on an HKIC matter and you're using Case Connect, our team actually reaches out to you to try and arrange a session with you so that you understand the tool before you proceed to make directions or make orders on that. And by that aspect, we're making the arbitrators more comfortable with the technology that they will be using. Same thing with virtual hearings. One of the idea behind testing and getting everybody to do a testing session on any virtual aspect of a hearing before their hearing starts came out of the pandemic, but it's something that we've actually kept, because one thing we've noticed is that by doing that with the arbitrators, they become much more comfortable with ordering it in future hearings or future arbitrations when it becomes appropriate or necessary. And so there's a lot that we're doing to help keep the arbitrators up to speed in terms of the tools that they need to use and the techniques that they need to use today.
Thank you. And personally, when I actually do any lectures or any presentation, I always tell them, and I'm a lawyer myself, that most lawyers are terrible salespeople. They're terrible at marketing, right? And as Michael alluded, sometimes when you give them the opportunity, they simply end up reading their CV or brochures and whatnot. So, one of the things that I would always actually ask them is, you got to consider yourself how the institution views you because we actually do keep quantifiable evaluations on your performance. Are you effective? Do you actually drive the process, in an efficient manner? Are you timely? Can we reach you? Right? Do you have a consistent habit of delaying awards issuance and whatnot? And those are things that's going to be affecting your standing with all of the institutions. And trust me, we're all people. So we know who are the good people, even the good arbitrators who may not have the best interpersonal skills. If you satisfy certain core skill sets, that we're happy with you as well. Having said that, let's go back to, and we got about maybe 8-9 minutes of time left. Common set of challenges that I think the audience members and we as an institution could actually share. The psychology of arbitration has changed. The market has changed. The psychology of the employees have changed. So in an institution where you want case managers or case counsel to be at their desk, preferably, you want to be able to see them in person if you need to have a meeting with them right away, and yet you have this digital platform, and we're very, should we say, flexible working environment. In some jurisdictions, that's actually demanded. Right? You can't have more than 2 days in office and 3 days out of the office, all of that. So that's actually striking a, as you say, a different set of problems. So, Donna, you're one of the larger institutions. Can I ask you, has that affected the work environment and the work productivity? Or do you feel that it's actually better or more efficient? Could I get your views on that?
Yes, actually. So during the pandemic, so we work from home, and after the pandemic, I think a flexible working pattern become like a new normal. We still follow the practices during the pandemic. For the Paris headquarters offices, staffs work 2 days in office and 3 days work from home. And for the overseas offices, so we have the discretion, follow the Paris practice as well. So I think that, it depends on which role you take. I assume my bosses would rather to see me more often in the office, while myself would rather stay at home more often. So it depends, really depends on who you are and which role you take. But from the efficiency perspective, I don't feel we lose efficiency at all. For instance, we just got a emergency arbitrator request for asking we identify the emergency arbitrator, the EA, and the EA issue order within 13 hours. And this case was just received in this October. And then our counsel and managed counsel and president actually pulled a all-nighter, and then go fight that person, and that EA issued the award in time. So I think that's definitely not depends on which working pattern you choose. It depends on how you treat this job. So from our perspective, we don't literally see the differences before the pandemic, or sitting in front of a desk, or sitting in your desk at home. So there's no big differences.
Judge Rao, this question may not be relevant to you, but actually I just want to get your views as you being a former Supreme Court judge, and I could tell by just looking at you, you're steeped in tradition, academic, and all of that. What are your views on the flexible working schedule, from the institution, or from just personally, just out of curiosity?
When the pandemic arrived, I was a judge in the Supreme Court, and then we were all asked to work virtually in court because the courts could not stop functioning. Some of the judges were not attuned to technology, and they were not comfortable with virtual hearings. After about a year, there was a demand from the bar that physical hearings should commence in the Supreme Court. But on medical advice, we were asked not to start it too soon, but I saw that out of the 30 judges, most of the judges fell in line and then they were very happy doing online hearings. As an arbitrator for the past 1.5 years, I've seen a divide. People of yesteryears, rather people who are retired judges, etc., they still want to work on paper. They don't want to change. They want even procedural hearings to be physical. But I've seen during the past 1 year people adapting themselves to technology. We have even cross-examinations being done virtually. The institutions in India have all decked up for meeting the challenge. All facilities of online dispute resolutions have been set up. The user is comfortable with online resolutions. So it's going to be a digital economy-driven arbitration now. And I see for the next 5 years, unless people embrace technology, they would be left behind. Recently, the Chief Justice of India made a statement saying that pandemic, no pandemic, we would continue virtual hearings in not only the Supreme Court, but in all high courts as well as the lower courts, including the tribunals. There was one High Court judge who said that I will not permit virtual hearings, and then there was an iteration by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court saying that nothing of that sort should happen. I see that the virtual hearings have come to stay, and that's going to be the norm soon. In a large country like India, you have people traveling for a day or two to reach Delhi to argue their cases and after briefing their seniors. Now anybody can appear from anywhere and then argue their cases. Apart from that, as Christopher was saying, welcome to the future. I think AI has already taken over. We are there in the present.
Thank you. Of the few, just a couple minutes, just one last 30-second bit. I'm going to ask selective institutions, but I do want to actually go back to Jay. One question, more of a personal question. What keeps you up at night?
Thinking about what UNSTRAW has to do. But actually, I wanted to go back to the first question that you actually posed. I think I was looking at the theme of our panel. It says endemic, new crossroads. Now, if you look up I'm not sure if the organizers had this in mind, but I'm not sure if endemic means the end of the pandemic or endemic itself. If you look at the definition, it is the baseline where there is like chicken poxes everywhere. It's the baseline. So I think if you're referring to the normal, I think we are coming back to the normal, and disputes will be our normal life. Now, the second aspect that I wanted to touch upon is the crossroads that you have. Now, if you look at crossroads, it sounds good, but that means that you have to stop and take a look at the left and right before you can actually move on. And I think the role of the arbitration institutions and UNCITRAL in more general is to change these crossroads into roundabouts. I think there is a civil engineer report saying that roundabouts are better for traffic flows. And I think rather than having these legal obstacles which are disputes or different legal obstacles, I think the role of us as a community itself is to turn these crossroads into roundabouts in order for business to flow and for trade and investment to grow. So I think that's kind of this is what keeps me awake at night.
Great, thank you. One final question, maybe 10, 15 seconds each from each institution. I'll go with Eric first. Any tips or guidance or pleadings that you may have with the user saying, please do this so that we could work better with you?
I mean, really, again, we are there for the users, so it's a service industry, right? So anything that we can do to make it faster, easier, work with us to help make it faster and easier for your clients as well, right? So, in many cases, we're not the enemy. We're the institution, and in many cases, especially with adversarial advocacy, that gets lost in the mix sometimes.
It's basically, don't yell at us, right? Kevin.
Similar to what Eric said, I think that you want to figure out how to interface with the institution because the institution is there to assist with the resolution of the dispute. I would say that you can always put forward proposals, or if there's an issue, get it out to the institution at an early stage and do give feedback because institutions take it into account. So for us, draft rules, and then of course I think what is a good way to sort of end this panel is the best comments that we've always got on our draft rules are from members of other institutions, which should be unsurprising. So, but do give feedbacks as parties to the institution's draft rules and otherwise.
Michael.
Well, I stopped caring about AAA quite some time ago, so. But I want you to remember the institutions are your best friend, actually. When you have questions, just call them up. They would love to give you presentations. We're always looking to sort of close the gap between your unfamiliarity with the procedures so you can gain familiarity and training. So they're always more willing than you think. So reach out to them and you may find them very helpful.
Donna?
We are sure that Asian practitioners, the councils and the arbitrators has been well prepared to be the top tier among the other jurisdictions. So keep visibility, be involved. We're here for you.
I think that the core message that we're actually delivering here is institutions will try its best to keep the three traditions: the core services, expeditious, cost-effectiveness, good panel of arbitration and whatnot. But we are going to be changing everything else. And we are going to need your feedback on that as well. And with that, I'd like to actually thank each and every panel members here for their very straightforward and candid answers. I thank you for listening to an hour and 20 minutes of this. Thank you very much. Right? Let's give a good round of applause to the experts here. Thank you.
So that brings us to the end of session 1 of the 12th Asia Pacific ADR conference, and we would like to thank our distinguished moderator and all speakers once again. So ladies and gentlemen, please give them another round of big applause. And now you may go back to your seats. Thank you. And now it's time to take our lunch break. And for your information, session 2 will commence at 1:30 p.m. Korea Standard Time. So please enjoy your meal and please come back to your seats on time. Or better yet, please come back here at least 10 minutes prior to the commencement of session 2, which will begin at 1:30 p.m. KST. So enjoy your meal. Bon appetit. Thank you very much.